The world is watching.
Okay, we're back, and let's bring our other guest in tonight. Our feature interview, Carl Larson, returns from Ukraine Defense Support. Welcome back, Carl.
Hi, Rick. Good to be here.
I really appreciate you joining us again tonight. There's been so much that's happened since your last visit here on the program, but maybe for those who missed the last broadcast with you, can you again just introduce yourself?
Sure. Happy to, Rick. So my name is Carl Larson, calling from Seattle, Washington, United States. I'm a American citizen, not Ukrainian, don't speak Ukrainian. However, in 2022, I spent 6 months in Ukraine, most of that time as a soldier in the International Legion. I was an ordinary rifleman and a platoon commander and the head of combat support for 1st Battalion, Charlie Company, Charlie 2 Platoon, and east of Kharkiv along the Severodonetsk River. Back then, that was the front line, and we were holding it against the orcs on the other side of the river. So that's me.
Okay. So now you're, I guess, trying to help raise awareness and bring your perspective on this war and why you think that Canada, the United States, the West, NATO needs to continue to support Ukraine in their efforts. Just since your last visit here, we've seen so much develop. We've seen these tactical nuclear weapon drills with Russia, which raised a lot of concerns. I'm going to throw it to you, though, because so many different subjects that we could talk about. What would you like to start with tonight? I just don't know where to begin.
Well, it's a big topic. What's going on in Europe now is unprecedented since World War II, and so there's a lot of different aspects of it we could cover off on. But so we should definitely talk about the nuclear weapon threats and extortion, and how we in the West should respond to that. What's worked in the past in responding to threats from the Soviet Union and from Nazi Germany, and what didn't work in the past. So we'll definitely talk about that. Just to finish up, though. So after returning to Seattle after 6 months of the front lines, so I started a group here, Ukraine Defense Support. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. We've raised about over $300,000 worth of night vision drones, vehicles, medical supplies, you name it, we bought it and sent it, except for weapons. We don't do weapons. It's all non-lethal. So we got about 60 active volunteers, mostly here, but also around the country, and a few Canadians, some of which I'm very happy to have introduced you to. And there's a few other Canucks I got to send your way as well. So we're just, I may have set down my rifle, but I still view myself as a soldier in this war, and I feel this is the most important thing happening in the world, and so therefore I'm privileged to be part of it and stand on the right side of history, and therefore happy to share any information. I do talk to my soldier brothers and sisters all the time. I was just talking to 2 of them this morning, very early this morning, midday their time, right? You got to work around their schedule, and so I do have some pretty up-to-date information. And then from the front lines. And then my group's very involved in political advocacy in Washington, D.C. I spent over a week there last month, along with 18 other members from the state, as part of a 600-person conference on trying to break the logjam on that supplemental aid package. And as we discussed in the last program I joined, we did succeed in doing that. We got even more than we wanted. We got not just the 61 billion, but we also passed the Repo Act, which is really very promising, and then to reallocate frozen Russian money towards helping Ukraine. And then we got the ATACMS missiles. So now we can force the Biden administration to do what they should have done years ago, really, and provide the ATACMS missiles to Ukraine. So hopefully that moves forward quickly. So to pivot to your question about nuclear threats of nukes. I mean, it's an unfortunate fact of the world that we live in that really unpleasant people who are not our friends have the potential to destroy human civilization and existence. I mean, this is a fact that unfortunately humanity's had to live with for 80 years, sadly, or I guess 70 years. Now, what Putin has specifically done to try to ratchet up the threats is he has, it's already been known that he had tactical nukes, sometimes called suitcase nukes, brought into Belarus, right? These are small nukes that I shouldn't say suitcase. That implies that terrorists are going to get a hold of it. But nukes that are small enough to put on a short range missile, or to even put it in the back of a vehicle and drive across a border, or put on a boat and sail it down the river and sail it into Kyiv or something like that, or just put it on a missile and blow up a target in eastern Ukraine. So the question is, how should we, the West, react to this? To his So I should mention. So he's had these in Belarus ever since the start of the war, or the start of the invasion. What he's done recently is he's conducting exercises with these missiles and with these nukes. And this is just a clear way of ratcheting up pressure on the West to essentially not interrupt his aggressive actions in eastern Ukraine. And so the question is, what should we do about this? And so, I mean, I would look at history and how have we successfully contained other aggressive dictatorships that are, invading their neighbors or threatening to invade their neighbors. What's worked in the past and what hasn't worked? And I would say that the containment policy that was implemented against the Soviet Union was a phenomenal success. I mean, it took, 60 years in some cases, 50 years in other cases, but it did work. And it's, as far as I know, the first time in history that a empire collapsed without invading its neighbors first, which is quite an accomplishment. I think we have a lot to owe to the leadership of Reagan and Thatcher and the other strong leaders in the West who said, enough is enough. We can't kowtow to these people. We have to call out evil. This is an evil empire. Tear down this wall, right? Those are famous words, controversial words at the time, I should point out.
Yes.
So that worked. Unfortunately, it took a long time, and there were millions, tens of millions of people who had to live slavish lives under communism for a long time under the political philosophy that's responsible for the most deaths and suffering in human history, communism. People forget that. They think the Nazis created the most misery in history. No, it's actually communism. Communists killed the most people in history. Important to keep that in mind. So that worked. What didn't work is when Neville Chamberlain in 1939, I believe it was, flew to Munich and made a deal with Hitler saying, okay, well, you can have the Sudetenland, but no more. And then he came back waving this piece of paper saying, well, this is the extent of Mr. Hitler's territorial ambitions in Europe. And we soon learned that that was not true. So, I think the majority of world leaders understand that this is saber rattling by Putin. It's political posturing. He's not really going to use nukes of any type, big or small, in Ukraine. I mean, you can say a lot of bad things about Putin, and I have, and I will, but he's not dumb. He's not stupid. He's not going to do something that is going to be counterproductive to his efforts to hold on to power. And he's not going to do something that is going to hurt his war aims in Ukraine. And if you Google the matter and you look at, well-known military historians and military analysts, they are pretty much unanimous in stating that using nuclear weapons in Ukraine would not hurt, or they would not help the Russians. They would hurt the Russians. I mean, let's say, Putin decided to use nukes in Avdiivka or Chasiv Yar. Like, first of all, he would have to evacuate all of his soldiers, or the vast majority of them, out of the area, and which would be a big red flag. And then let's say he blew up a concentration of Ukrainian command posts and ammo dumps and, marshalling yards for their vehicles. Okay. First of all, there's going to be a huge radioactive no-go zone that his troops are not going to want to enter, even with NBC gear. And we trained for that in the U.S. Army when I was in the U.S. Army 20 years ago. But I was told if you had to put that stuff on, you better lean down and kiss your you-know-what goodbye, because you do not want to be in a nuclear blast zone. Maybe on the outskirts of it, you might be okay for a limited time, but so that's a problem. But a greater problem to Putin is the international condemnation that would occur after breaking the nuclear taboo. It's called the nuclear taboo, right? Only one country has used nukes in wartime, and that's the United States. And I think most reasonable people recognize that it was a good thing that we did, that we actually saved a lot of lives. We saved a lot of Japanese lives, frankly. They estimated it would take a million American dead to take Tokyo, but millions more Japanese would have died. I mean, they were giving them sharpened sticks to defend, and they didn't have bread to eat. They were eating sawdust at the end of the war. So and each other. So using nukes in that circumstance, I think was a mercy, frankly. Maybe some Japanese people would disagree with me, but but for someone to break that nuclear taboo now, I mean, I could see ISIS doing it. I could see Al Qaeda doing it. Sure, they'd love to do it, but Putin, every military analyst says that there's virtually zero chance that he'd do it. So I'd be curious what other guests on your show, suggest that we do in response to this. I'd be very curious. But essentially, what I've seen from world leaders is they're still staying the course. They're still supporting Ukraine, and Putin can rattle his saber all he wants. They're still going to keep doing the right thing.
Well, as seems to me there are very limited, very only certain circumstances where even tactical nukes might be used by Russia, and that would include maybe seeing a massive advance of, say, NATO troops through Ukraine, and he wants to stop it because he can't really defend against it, or if there's some sort of direct attack within Russia's borders on a massive scale, and he wants to stop it there before they progress too far in. And his back is up against the wall, maybe. But even then, it's very risky. It's difficult to use them in a way that would be advantageous to him because he might kill his own people.
Yeah, so you pointed out they work a lot better in defense, especially defense of the homeland, than they do in offense.
Mm-hmm. And this scenario that we're involved in right now, these drills, it seems to me it's just PR. It's like sending a message, don't send NATO troops in here. I think that's what he's trying to convey.
Yeah, and I don't see NATO troops. I mean, I know Macron said some stuff. I know that some other countries have kind of puffed out their chests and said some stuff. I don't see maybe a few advisors here and there, but I don't see. I mean, I'm sure the CIA is in there already quite extensively, mm-hmm. But I don't see us having boots on the ground in Ukraine anytime soon. I don't think the NATO alliance would agree to that because, of course, that would be a cause belli to Russia, and as soon as one of those troops was killed, then there'd be a lot of backlash, and people would ask questions like, why are those troops in there? Why are we, there's such a thing as providing support to an ally and doing the right thing. But then there's also, directly declaring war without declaring war. And so you have to walk that line. I don't see us sending troops.
Yeah, that's why I think it's important to have you on here, because you're providing a totally different perspective on this than we're getting from, other, I would say, pro-Russian pundits out there, who I'm hearing say Ukrainian troops are pretty much decimated. The war is pretty much over. It's pointless in sending the aid over there, and it's only a matter of time if this continues. Very, very soon they'll have to bring in conscription or the draft, and you'll have to send your sons and daughters to fight on the front lines in Ukraine. Is this a war that you really want to fight on behalf of Ukraine? We should just give up now and just withdraw. So I'm
Right,
very
of course, we
interested,
should
and
just
that's
give up.
really what we're hearing, right?
We should
So,
close all of our bases. We should never annoy Russia in any way in the future. They're our friends anyway, right? Sure.
and I would like better relations with Russia. I certainly would,
Sure, me
but
too.
I also understand the realities of geopolitics, and nation states do things that they think are in their best interests. And in this case, Putin is, he's building the bricks and building a parallel economy. It's an economic war as much as anything else. And what we're seeing happen in Ukraine is, well, it's I'm going to throw it to you and just let you explain your perspective. We're not going to see a conscription? You don't think we're going to see a draft as a result of any of this?
Well, you mean here in North America, in Canada, and the U.S., or
Yeah,
you
because
mean
they're saying that they're running out of troops in Ukraine. So the only way to continue the war is to send NATO troops, and that means sending our guys
No,
in.
there's plenty. Listen, in Lviv, I was pissed off when I got demobilized. I was bloody and hurt, and had just seen some of my brothers killed. And I go to Lviv, and there's all these, Kyiv was reasonably locked down, and Kharkiv was definitely locked down. But in Lviv, there was a bunch of young, fit guys out playing frisbee at the park, at Taras Shevchenko Park. There's this big park in downtown Lviv, and I remember walking by and giving them the evil eye. And Ukraine. Okay, Ukraine doesn't have inexhaustible supplies of manpower. Neither does Russia, by the way, although they'd like you to believe they do. Russia does have a lot more fit fighting age men to draw on than Ukraine does. But Ukraine still has reserves. They still have people. They're trying not to call up. They're trying to call up just enough guys. Like Israel made this mistake, right? After October 6th, they called up too many people, and it really hurt their economy. And so then they dialed it back and sent a bunch of them home. I got some Israeli friends. They're like, yeah, I went to the marshalling yard, hung out there for a week, and then they sent me home. It's stupid, right? Because there's a balance there. If you call up too many of your citizen soldiers, your economy is going to suffer. And so Ukraine finally passed this long-awaited, long-delayed mobilization order, and so they're going to get more troops. Is it going to be enough troops? I don't know. It's a good question. And Russia definitely has been mobilizing. And like I said on the last program I was on, they, after that big presidential election, it's kind of a rubber stamp. But after Putin was reconfirmed as president, they quietly mobilized another couple 100,000, and now they're being trained up. As I predicted, late May, early June, they're going to make a push on some major cities. I'm not going to say which cities, but it wouldn't come as a big surprise to anybody following. And so now they're doing that. They're trying to push. They're actually getting an early start on it because they want to take as much ground as possible before those HIMARS arrive, basically. And so it is a concerning situation. Does it mean that Ukraine's going to lose the war? I mean, no. It means that they'll be somewhat more limited. They won't have as much free reign to, say, plan another counteroffensive like they did last year. I doubt there's going to be any kind of a counteroffensive in 2024. If there is, I hope it's planned a lot better than the last one. But does it mean that we're going to be conscripted? I mean, that's here in the U.S., that's just a dumb scare tactic. Anybody who'd say that doesn't know his proper brand of propaganda, because there's much more effective propaganda that would work on an American audience than saying that you're going to get conscripted and sent to the trenches of eastern Ukraine. I don't think that would really fly.
So you are kind of rejecting that argument, and I guess if I'm hearing you correctly, you think that part of the narrative is really just being used to undermine support for the war. And I guess when I say support, funding for the war.
Yeah, I mean, so there are legitimate, I would say, concerns about the war, and there's effective ways for people who are against the war to articulate those concerns. concerns about, is the money being properly vetted? Is it going to the right units? Is, how much is this of the equipment that's being sent? How much is it effective equipment that the Ukrainians really need, or are we just cleaning out our warehouses to make more money for arms manufacturers? There's a lengthy list of legitimate concerns about how our aid money is being spent. Arguments like, oh, hey, our kids are going to get conscripted and sent to the trench. Like, I don't know who's going to believe that. That's kind of out there.
Okay. Well, that's 180 degrees on the opposite side of what we're hearing from, some of the really prominent analysts, if you want to call them that, out there. But I will say this: those guys, I've watched over the last 2 years, they've been consistently wrong. They keep saying the war's over, might as well give up. But here we are 2 years later, and they're still saying the same thing. What about these F-16s, which we're hearing from those guys? It's like these F-16s will be considered by Putin to be nuclear capable aircraft, able to carry nuclear weapons, and because of that, they're just going to be instantly destroyed, and it's a provocation and escalation from the West.
Well, it is an escalation, and you could call anything a provocation. I mean, really, besides it, the HIMARS have been the best thing we've sent over there. The HIMARS work really well, and these ATACMS are really amazing. I'm a little concerned the Russians did demonstrate capability to shoot them down, but that's limited, and that's less so much at the front lines. It's more if the Ukrainians shoot them into Russia, then the Russians have really good air defense at the border. But at the front lines, they don't have as good an air defense against that particular type of missile. That might change in the future. But I think those ATACMS are going to make a big difference. Now, and so you can call those a provocation and an escalation. I mean, every bullet we send over there is an escalation, I mean, as long as we're not sending boots on the ground, then I'd say, according to the normal rules of war and international relations, we have not declared war on Russia. And that's the line that has to be followed. I mean, our F-16... So first of all, F-16s. Okay, so I'm not. Maybe call me a ground pounder. Blame my infantry roots in the U.S. Army and then over there in Ukraine. But I'm not a huge. I don't think the F-16s are going to make a huge difference in this conflict. I think they'll be helpful, sure, and they'll be a symbol of American technological superiority, and maybe we'll get some good test data out of it. And they might shoot down a couple Su-27s, which would be great because those things are raining glide bombs on Kharkiv like there's no tomorrow, and it's a huge problem. So that might help a little bit. Really, the ATACMS are vastly more effective, and really what the Ukrainian military needs is about 100,000 more PVS-14s. $2,000 to $3,000 night vision. They desperately need that, or thermals for their weapons. $3,000 thermals. If every infantry squad, if every infantry squad in the 250,000 frontline deployed Ukrainian units had each soldier had a PVS-14, like every soldier in my unit before I went to war did, and a helmet mount for it, and then if one out of every 6 soldiers in the assault squads had a $3,000 thermal sight on his weapon. Huge game changer, huge, because a lot of the combat now happens at night, and both sides are really kind of blindly groping around. I've heard numerous stories of my buddies over there having to crawl through minefields to do their combat ops, and trying to weigh, okay, the moon's out tonight, so we can get stuff done, but it's too bright. We better stay indoors, things like that. And then, of course, the FPV drones and the recon drones, they're starting to switch over from regular optics to thermal. So the battle space is very much transitioning to nighttime. I think that would make a vastly greater difference. But F-16s look good. They roll off the tongue. People who are not military minded think that they're going to make a huge difference. So, maybe there'll be a morale booster. Who knows? But the thing is, both sides have such good, strong anti-aircraft defenses that I just don't see them being used too heavily at the front lines. And and plus they're so maintenance intensive. I just see them breaking soon and having to be sent back to Poland or Germany. So I'm not a huge F-16 guy. Hope that answers your question.
Well, I've been saying for a long time this is an information war as much as anything else. That might, I think, actually be the main front line,
Yeah,
especially where Russia is concerned. And I have to tell you, I think you're losing the information war
that's kind of true.
badly, very, very badly. And I'm just looking in our chat here tonight, and you don't have a whole lot of support here, sir. So I'm going to throw it to you. Why should people care? I'd have to say too. I'm going to preface this way. I can't think of a time, either in my lifetime or before that I'm aware of, where there has been so much public pushback against people's own country. Where, this is essentially a pro-U.S., pro-Ukrainian alliance, right? NATO, and there's so much anti-NATO emotion, I think, involved here, and it's a result of the information war. People, you justify it. You tell these folks why you think it's important for people for this war to continue to have Western support.
Well, so you point out that there's a lot of people, especially conservative folks, who unfortunately have been very effectively propagandized against their own national interests. And you point out that the information war, the propaganda, is not being effectively fought. I think we are effectively fighting the orcs in Ukraine. I think the U.S. support is the reason why Ukraine is still in the fight. I think if we didn't provide those weapons, they would have had to kneel to the Russian boot by now. But you point out a good thing, which is a truth, that is that while the Russian military is very strong and effective, their propaganda army is much more effective. And I mean, they've attacked. I view it as an attack. They've used their propaganda on Western democracies for decades now. Let's not forget, Putin is a former KGB officer. He learned all this stuff firsthand. And he was sent to Germany specifically to propagandize and to subvert the German people. And they attacked our democracy. They put their finger on the scale of our elections. And it doesn't matter if you're pro or anti-Trump. It just matters that we can't have a foreign country affecting our elections. We can't allow that. And there's been some changes and some safeguards put in place to try to minimize that. It'll be very interesting to see what happens with this coming election, because clearly they would have some favorites there. But we'll see what kind of sticky Russian fingers we find on the knobs there. But why should the average American care? Why should the average American ignore the propaganda that's telling them to we should put our heads in the sand? We should, close our overseas bases. We should stop supporting Ukraine. We should pull out of NATO. We should just mind our own corner, right? We should mind our own knitting. And I've seen all these great memes online on all these Facebook groups where it shows a picture of the globe and it says, "This is where my tax dollars should go," and it's just the United States. And for your viewers, it would be just Canada, right? And I mean, I understand that perspective, especially when people are paying way too much for gas, and and you look at the price of groceries now and inflation, and then it's easy to be angry about that, and people should be angry about that, and they should vote, to change that. But if you are voting if you think those issues are related, if you think that your gas is expensive because you're supporting freedom in Ukraine, well, guess what? Whoever's connecting those two probably has an ulterior motive, and their ulterior motive is to destroy the ability of America and Canada and Western democracies to stand for good in the world. And I mean, Hitler was not a dumb guy, but he was not very smart when it came to propaganda. If you look historically, he tried to, he had kind of an abortive effort to activate German minorities and German immigrants in other countries. Of course, he did that very successfully in Czechoslovakia, and he tried to do that in the United States. There's a famous rally in Madison Square Garden in, I believe it was 1938, that over 100,000 people showed up at. But he didn't really do it effectively, and nowhere near the way Putin is doing this. And Putin is much smarter about it. The way Putin does it is he identifies existing grievances, existing problems and divisions within society, and he supports the extremists on the far left and on the far right. And then he amplifies existing problems. So like I said, people are upset because their gas is way too expensive, and they see the policies of their government is making things worse, not better. And they're angry about this. And there was a contested election, and they feel their voices are not heard. And if they try to speak up about this, they're just shouted down, right? Told that they're deplorables. And if they, question the situation, well, they must be racist or sexist or another ist, right? And so they should just shut up. And so, of course, they're angry about this, as they should be angry about this. But then they have to realize that anytime you're angry, you're susceptible to being manipulated. And the way Putin's propaganda works is it says, you're angry about this problem, this divisions in your society. Well, the solution to that is to stop supporting these people overseas who are fighting for their freedom. And if you think about it, there's no connection. Just like supporting England in 1940 and 1941 before the United States joined the war on England's behalf. That was in our national interest. Supporting freedom around the world is in our interest. Now, did we have a lot of problems at that time and a lot of domestic concerns? And could we have spent all that money on other things? Yeah. I mean, during World War II, the maximum tax rate was 90%. It was crazy. Could we have built our own economy instead of sending all those ships and all those supplies to England before we entered the war? Yeah. But was it the right thing to do to support them? In 1940 and 41, I would strongly argue, yeah. And I think most Americans and Canadians would agree that it was the right thing to do. And so that's my argument. I'm not going to delve into a bunch of data and say, hey, we're going to, sending ATACMS to Ukraine is going to boost our economy by this much, or, there's other financial reasons we should do this or whatever. No, none of that really matters. What matters is doing the right thing. And I would say, I would appeal to your listeners. I mean, feel free to write in the comments, give me rational, logical reasons why supporting Ukraine is not the moral thing to do. Like, don't say, oh, we should spend our money securing the southern border. I totally agree we should secure the southern border. But you know what? Stopping supporting Ukraine is not going to secure the southern border. Those issues are not linked. Again, they're not linked. And we should do both. We're a big, rich country. We should be able to chew gum and run at the same time. So give me a logical, moral reason why we shouldn't support Ukraine. I'd be curious.
Sure. I mean, I personally, I didn't want the war to start. I'm not in favor of wars, but now we're into the middle of this thing. And I do see that if Ukraine falls and Russia, say, takes over the whole country, I see real problems that will develop here in the West. I see the cracks that have developed in NATO maybe becoming a lot worse, and maybe even NATO breaking apart. But I'm not going to sit here and just spout off with my opinions. You tell the audience, what, in your view, would happen if Ukraine falls back into Russian hands?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. I've actually done quite a bit of research on what would be the likely consequences of Ukrainian failure, Ukrainian loss, Ukrainian defeat. And I don't talk about this subject with the members of my group, so I look forward to talking to you about it, because I don't want to. Ukrainians have a very emotionally invested interest in their country succeeding as a democracy, right? So this is a topic that is not really easy to have with them, in my experience. But I think it's important for cooler heads to consider all possibilities. What is it they say? Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And so what would it mean if Russia conquered Ukraine? So, and this is, by the way, entirely possible. The flow of arms could immediately end at any time, perhaps with a change of administration, or there could be a major event like Zelensky. There's been over a dozen assassination attempts on Zelensky, and they could get him. They could get him at any time. that would make a huge negative blow to Ukrainian morale and Ukrainian ability to fight.
In fact, he just fired his bodyguard because of this most recent assassination attempt. So that is something I was going to talk about tonight, but I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I'll let you continue.
I actually hadn't heard that. I'm going to have to Google it. So very interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of assassination attempts on him. Putin sent several kill teams to Kyiv in the opening stages of the conflict, but he's been steadily sending assassins that have been more and more and more sophisticated throughout the conflict. So as I understand it, Zelensky is one of the most heavily guarded men on the planet, which makes his ability to lead his country much harder, of course. So Russia could indeed win. They could. So what would a win by Russia mean? Well, so the most likely victory would be gradual successes on the battlefield, leading to a ceasefire that would harden the Russian positions within Ukraine, and therefore de facto causing the roughly 18% of Ukrainian territory that's in Russian hands to become essentially part of Russia for all intents and purposes. It would probably be decades before they were officially confirmed as such by the United Nations, but for all intents and purposes, they would be, much as Crimea is today. So that's phase one, option one. If that were to happen, then the Russians would shift to an attempt at regime change in Kyiv, and they would attempt to overthrow Zelensky or encourage some sort of astroturfed Ukrainian movement to overthrow Zelensky and replace him with Yanukovych or one of these other pro-Russia politicians that they have waiting in the wings. They've got they've got a bench of them. They've got a bench of them for every country. They probably have them for Canada and the U.S. too, but they've got them ready. And so that would be what they would try to do is they would try to make things as miserable for the average Ukrainian for as long as possible until the average Ukrainian says, you know what, enough. Let's just go to our regular lives and let's overthrow. I'll look away while some group overthrows Zelensky, and then we can get back to our lives as usual. That's been Putin's plan. So if they do that, those two outcomes are the most likely. A less likely but still possible outcome would be that Russia conquers the entire country and slowly converts it into a pro-Russia satellite of Russia. If that happens, then they would probably build Russian military bases along the Polish-Ukrainian border, along the Romanian-Moldovan border. And if that were to happen, that would require NATO to rebuild the dozens of bases that we had, in West Germany and Poland and Czechoslovakia. One of those bases I served at 20 years ago, right after the Cold War, but the bases are still there. We would have to rebuild those along the Polish and Romanian and Hungarian Ukrainian border. And then we would have to staff them with hundreds of thousands of troops. So you're talking about trillions of dollars of defense spending that would otherwise not need to be spent. Now, would we need to build those bases if just the option one or option two overthrow of the country were completed? It's a question mark. There's a good chance that Putin would not build any bases next to the border just because he wouldn't want to provoke Poland. And Poland has one of the strongest militaries in Europe now. You could argue Poland has a stronger military than Germany now. So Poland's armed to the teeth. And so they probably are not going to be invading Poland anytime soon. But let's say they complete the takeover of Ukraine. They have a pro-Ukraine government installed. What happens next? So NATO would have to respond in some way, probably with a lot more troops. And you've already seen the increased defense spending by Western democracies, Western countries, Germany, France, Spain, all the rest, which is good. It's long overdue, frankly. So then the defense analysts that I've seen are, and actually this is not secret. They uncovered a a Russian planning document for invading a part of one of the Baltic countries, probably Estonia. Estonia has a large number of Russian-speaking, Russian-sympathizing residents. Some of them are Estonian citizens. Some of them are Russian citizens that happen to live in Estonia. Same for Latvia and Lithuania, but to a lesser extent. And so this planning document showed that a plan for Russia to reconquer a part of Estonia that was traditionally Russian and had a very low population on it of primarily Russian-speaking Estonians. And so if Putin had some little green men, right? Not Russian military. Oh no, they're Russian civilians on vacation with no insignias, right? If they were to go into Estonia and they were to take this little chunk of land and stop, then if the American president at that time and the head of NATO at that time says, you know what, we're not going to go to war for a couple square kilometers in Estonia that used to belong to Russia, that has people in it who are happy to belong to Russia again or be Russian citizens again. If they say that, then essentially NATO no longer exists because Article 5 will no longer carry any weight. And so that was what this Russian defense planning document said, is that if they can essentially drive a wedge within NATO and basically destroy the ability of Article 5 to deter future conflicts, then NATO as an organization would not have it would be defanged essentially. So that's one future scenario that we would have to prepare for. There's a lot more. Russia probably, based on the poor performance of its military and how much they've had to drain their economy to pour into this conflict in Ukraine, probably they're not going to be picking any major fights with anyone again real soon. Plus, I don't know if you're following events in Georgia, but they might be involved there sometime soon. So their focus after Ukraine would probably shift a little bit. And plus, viewers of this program may not be aware, but Russia and China actually don't really get along all that well. And therefore, Russia has had some traditional border conflicts and concerns about their eastern border as well. So long story short, what would it mean for a Russian victory in Ukraine? It would mean a lot more money and concern and threats for NATO. It might damage NATO's ability to function long term. And of course, it would be horrific for the 40 plus Ukrainians who would have to live under the Russian boot. And there would be a lot more international effects where authoritarians around the world would take heed of Russia's success and come to their own conclusions on that, right? I mean, China would realize, well, if it worked for Russia in Ukraine, it will probably work for us in Taiwan. You can see the results of this long term. So anyway, hopefully that answered your question.
Sure. And if NATO breaks up, this really, you talk about the new multipolar geopolitical reality that, we do hear discussions on. If NATO ceases to exist, man, that is a completely new scenario, and that would have a direct impact on the economy here. In so many different ways, because it's going to affect oil prices, the oil trade, the American dollar, because it's all very much connected. The economy here is really supported by international stability, the flow of goods through shipping, which that would all be in jeopardy. I can see real instability. People, I think, it's lost on people here how much impact it would have if Ukraine were to actually fall. It's a big concern to me, but
yeah, well, it's a big concern to me too, and it definitely would have a negative effect on a lot of international trade, and it would probably, I'm sure some people would make money off it no matter what, but it would be a negative to us economically. I'm more focused on the moral aspects. I feel that defending Ukraine is the right thing to do. Is it going to help my country economically? Probably, but that's not my primary concern. I feel like America and Canada will be all right. Even if NATO
I have to
fell,
say too that the leaders, when I hear Biden on CNN yesterday talking about how civilians have been killed with U.S. bombs in Gaza, I'm thinking, wow, that guy's not very good at PR.
he's
It's
not very
just,
good at anything, is he?
I know, it's just, it's
Yeah.
like, whose side are you on? It really, a lot of this does come down to public relations, and I just, and propaganda. And it's hard to know exactly
One
what
person's PR is another person's propaganda.
yeah, I don't know where it's all. That's why I wanted to bring you on, because I wanted some balance and perspective for people here, because all we're hearing over here is it's basically over, and we should just give up. It's kind of like listening to Tokyo Rose, but the Russian
Right.
version, right? Hey, yeah, Joe, you give up now. It's no
Right.
use, right?
Yeah. The war will be over next week, just like we said it would be last year and the year before. Right. Right.
Yeah. Do you see connection between what's going on in Gaza and Israel and what's happening in
Boy, it's interesting
Ukraine?
you asked that. I mean, I'm very insulated from what's going on in Israel, Palestine. I don't really pay a lot of attention. It's made my life a lot harder as someone who's supporting Ukrainian military units. It's definitely, I don't know if Putin was behind October 6th in some way or another. I do wonder, because he's been very close to Iran, and he did host several delegations from Hamas in Moscow. But if he was behind it, he was a genius, because it dramatically hurt the Ukrainian war effort. To give you one example, I mean, first of all, it wiped Ukraine right off the front pages, like you said. In the PR battle, it was a masterstroke. And then a lot of the donations dried up, because people are giving it to either one side or the other side of the Israel-Palestine thing. And then for me, if I'm trying to buy PVS 14s in bulk, I couldn't buy them. I mean, I could buy them off Amazon for $1,000 markup, but otherwise I couldn't get them for any normal supplier for 2 months, because Israel was buying every single one they could. So it really, and there were some other impacts too, but
I don't know if you're aware, like
go ahead.
the date of the Hamas invasion and the attack is actually October 7th. And do you know when Vladimir Putin's birthday is?
When?
October 7th.
Okay, I was unaware. Wow.
I'm just saying.
Well, I think the delegations from
It's the
Hamas
gift that keeps on giving.
for sure. No, I mean, he definitely benefited from that. Of course, a lot of other people suffered it. The terrible thing. I try not to pick a dog in that fight. I think it's unfortunate what's happening to both sides. I'd love for there to be some sort of a peace, and some sort of peace, and some sort of a trustworthy government in the occupied territories in Gaza, and in it's not occupied, excuse me, but using Ukrainian terms, but in Gaza and in the West Bank.
Yeah. Just to show people I'm not making it up. Okay. That's Vladimir Putin's birthday, October 7th, 1952.
That's funny. I did not know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. Hey, folks, don't shoot the messenger. Okay. You guys in the chat. I'm just saying.
It's all Rick's fault.
I know. I have to tell you, like, some people's heads were blowing up around here after I had you on the first time, and I think they're blowing up again tonight for some of these folks, because, there is absolutely a
disconnect.
Yeah. Anyway, man, I just don't know. This is such an interesting conversation. Carl, I'm not sure where to take the conversation from here. I just where can people get in touch with you or find out more? Tell them about your website and your contact info.
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, we make an effort to help provide resources for volunteers to get involved. Our goal is to make it easy for anybody on the planet to support Ukraine and really support the cause of freedom. We've got a number of resources here. So I mean, our website, we've got guides to buying, I don't know if you can see that, buying drones, buying night vision, buying, that's kind of, there we go. Buying night vision, buying vehicles. We just bought our 10th Humvee this last weekend. I'll be working on it this weekend. It's a beautiful ambulance Humvee. We're going to get it over there in less than a month. I'm super excited about it. So we've got lots of ways that people can get involved. There's lots of projects to on PR to fight Russian propaganda, to help tell the truth to people. We've got a really active communities of faith engagement team that's doing some amazing work connecting Ukrainian pastors with American pastors and American congregants, and just really telling the incredibly impactful stories of Russian persecution of Christians in the occupied territories, just horrific stories. I think I have a really good packet on that. So we're doing a lot of outreach in churches, in synagogues, both churches, Catholic, Orthodox, and a lot of evangelical churches. So Washington State has the one of the largest concentrations of Ukrainians in the country, and frankly in the world. Got about 200,000 here. They're primarily evangelical, and so we do a lot of presentations at their churches. And we try to connect them with American pastors and reverends to pray together and work together to help free the Ukrainian people. So there's lots of ways, lots of projects that people can get involved in. They can just go to the website and fill out the form, and it'll go to our onboarding team, and we'll reach out and identify how, what would be interesting for you to work on. We've got several weekly Zoom calls people can join. Of course, if they're here in Seattle, they can come in person to our in-person meetings on Thursday nights. But if they're national or even international, we've got calls all week long on various topics. We got an anti-drone call tomorrow, where there's a group called Tech for Ukraine that's doing amazing work on anti-drone technology and encrypted communications and supercharging Starlinks. And they're doing some really interesting things with Starlinks, I'll say. I can't really explain all the details, but really interesting things. So there's a lot of ways to get involved. Most groups just want people to give them money and then go away, but we're not that way. We want to get people involved, have them work directly with Ukrainian military units, and meet the soldiers and really get the firsthand knowledge of what life's like over there and how these people are defending their homes and their families and their way of life. It's really a life-changing experience to talk to these people and see how they're really fighting for their freedom and for our freedom. So yeah, if people want to go to the website, they're welcome to contact me that way. And I just wanted to close with just mention for some of your viewers and listeners whose heads might be exploding. I mean, it's important to have a balanced news diet and get outside of the bubble. And, make sure that you listen to stuff you disagree with occasionally and get the perspective. Even if you disagree with it, it's important to know that some people feel that way, even if you just want to argue with them, or even if you just want to know what they're thinking. Because I think, I can't speak for Canada, but here in the United States, we are more divided than at any time since the Vietnam War. And a lot of that comes down to just people not talking to each other, and people getting their news from very different sources and not looking at the big picture and not realizing that, especially the mainstream media has an agenda, and they have they have their pitch, and they're going to push you into their box. And that's why I really appreciate what you're doing, is helping free people from that mental imprisonment, really, and give them a dose of the truth, and also sharing both perspectives on important issues like Ukraine. So I really appreciate you having me on.
Well, yesterday, we were talking a little bit here, and I did show a little bit of footage of the Russian Victory Day parade. That is very much part of the Russian PR machine, right? Both domestically and internationally. And when I'm watching that stuff, I'm like, wow, that's pretty impressive, and very high production value on the video side. And they've got cranes for the video cameras, and it's beautifully shot. And this is sending a message around the world of power, organization, public support for Putin, for the war effort. Very patriotic. Here in the West, I'm not seeing as much of that, but that I think is because we live in a kind of a free, open society where people are allowed to express their opinions, and or even vulnerable to, I think, foreign information warfare. So we've got more chaos over here. It might not come off as being as patriotic, but it certainly is, I think, to a degree, freer. It might seem very regimented over there, but maybe it's better if we're not all goose stepping.
Yeah, but
parade,
I mean, Trump wanted to have a military parade, and he's absolutely right. And they shot him down because they didn't want to pour a bunch of extra concrete in Washington D.C. because tanks destroy streets, right? I know, I was a tanker, but I mean, I don't know why we couldn't do that. I think a large number of Americans. I mean, there's going to be some people who are like, "Ooh, tanks, gross," whatever. Those people don't have to watch. But I think that, like you said, it shows power and strength and patriotism and support for the military and military support for the state. Frankly, I don't see what's wrong with that. And I wish that we'd do that here. You know who else does that is France. I mean, France hosted Trump and for one of those military parades. I think it was on the Champs-Elysees, and he was very impressed. Why can't we do that? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, Carl, thank you so much for, again, spending the time here with us tonight. I think it's super important to provide the balance and, various perspectives on this. Otherwise, people can't really make an informed decision. You can't do that with just one perspective or one side of a story. So I'm really very appreciative.
Well, of course, happy to be here. Happy to come back any other time. And, if your viewers want to get in touch, I'd be happy to talk to them. I think that there's a great way. Now is the time. This is our fight. So thanks for having me.
Okay. All right. My pleasure. And look forward to having you back again. Ladies and gentlemen, Carl Larson, Ukraine Defense Support. I'll be back right after this. Don't go away.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, folks, I am back, and we can continue with a little bit more of today's top news stories. One of the things that I did want to talk to you about is this big geopolitical, not politics at all. It's like a geomagnetic super solar storm that is it's brewing out there, and the first waves of these solar flares, the energy coming from that, have started to hit Earth now. As a result, I guess we're going to see some spectacular northern lights. Yeah, I don't know if you've ever witnessed or seen the northern lights, but they're beautiful. Here in Canada, and certainly up north you get to see them, but they're going to be so powerful, from all that I'm reading and hearing about this, that they'll be visible potentially even from as far away as Texas. So that's pretty cool. As a result, we're getting a bunch of different media, like even local media down as far as Texas and over in Seattle. They're talking about this. I think it's going to be more spectacular than the eclipse we just went through. Here's this is Fox 4. I'm going to run a couple of reports from local media outlets. This is Dallas, Fox 4. Here's what they have to say about it. This is pretty cool stuff. Let's listen in.
The strongest solar storm to strike Earth since 2005 is on its way tonight. Because of that, NOAA did issue a geomagnetic storm watch for the planet Earth. This is due to a G4 class solar storm, which is severe on the scale. Now, some of the effects that we might see from this tonight are possible voltage issues to the power grid up north. Disruptions are possible to satellite navigation as well. And auroras could be possible all the way down to the Gulf Coast coast tonight, especially on the horizon. If you want to have a good shot at seeing this, you are going to have to get out of areas of light pollution and also use a camera as well to see it best on the horizon. Now, if you really want to see it tonight, you're going to have to go north up into places like South Dakota, Minnesota, Illinois, Michigan, and especially up into Canada.
Yeah, up here in Canuck Land, where the northern lights look like this. Let me show you some videography. This is not tonight. This is recorded footage dating back to, this was actually 1 year ago, but this is footage shot in Canada, northern Canada. And look at the beautiful northern lights, man. There's some music on this, but I'm going to take that off so we don't get a copyright strike. But look at this stuff. So this solar storm, which is having an impact on conditions here on Earth tonight and over the weekend, you're going to see a lot of this stuff. And it's going to be so powerful, these lights will be visible potentially as far away as Texas. So very unusual. I'm going to spend some time tonight. I'm going to go out, walk my dog, and take a look and see if I can get a gander at, what do they call these? The Aurora Borealis? The northern lights. Very cool stuff. Look at that. That's real. Like, that's not just computer generated stuff. This footage, I know, this is just shot on video, not edited, not just plain raw footage. And that's what it can look like. That was a year ago. Tonight, it's supposed to be even more intense and over the weekend. So if you can get out of the city into an area where you don't have too much light pollution, no matter where you are in Canada and parts of the United States, you may be able to witness some of this action. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? Mother Nature is so powerful, isn't it? Isn't she? Beautiful stuff. It kind of puts things in perspective, doesn't it? Makes you feel kind of small, I would say. Here's a report from, well, since we had Carl Larson on from Seattle, let's go to Seattle and see what they're saying down there at Fox 13. Let's bring this up. Don't miss this. You don't want to miss the Aurora Borealis.
Hey, welcome back. 7:14. Check it out. You're not going to want to miss this. A severe geomagnetic storm forecasted for this weekend means there's a chance to see the northern lights. And here in the Pacific Northwest, we're forecasting to see mostly clear skies, so that's good news. The storm is predicted for late tonight, early tomorrow morning. So the best chance to see the aurora is typically between midnight and 3 a.m. when the sky is at its most darkest point. It's also best to get far away from city lights and the pollution of those lights. And I've seen it before. It's such a cool thing. You really don't have to go that far. You just get a little bit away from the city lights.
Just get away from the city lights if you can, yeah. And I mean, mountains are a good spot, or up toward the San Juans. Just get away from the main cities, and then you should be able to see it late tonight between midnight and 3 a.m. It'll be on the dimmer side where we live, but northern parts of Washington could have a much better chance. Let's zoom in, and you can see the red is where we're going to see it the best, brightest up in Canada. Boy, are they lucky. But we will be able to see it, or should be able to see it, in the green area, which encompasses our entire state. Even down in Oregon, they may be able to see it as well.
Yeah, well, might be lucky right now, but not so lucky, say, in January. Especially if you live in northern Canada, where you're going to get hit with weather that might be beautiful, but boy, it's cold up there. Too cold for me. That's why I'm down here in southern Ontario. I don't know. I'm going to look in the chat here. Have you guys, how many of you have actually witnessed in a real way the northern lights? Just going to take a look in the chat. Jilly Bean, of course, going straight to the Carrington event. Yeah, of course. Yeah, so there we are talking about the beautiful northern lights and how bright and colorful they are, and instantly going to darkness and despair. I'm not too worried about it. I think we'll get through it okay there, Jilly Bean. We're going to make it. The solar storm, I don't think, is going to kill us. Here's Rising Dragon, 1 in the 90th. He says, I don't know what that means. Mr. Smith. And Mr. Smith says, I have. It's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, that just amazing stuff. Now, here is another report from WDIV Detroit, Michigan. Just down the road from me. Not too far from where I live, only about an hour. Let's get their perspective on this. WDIV, they're going to tell us what we should see in our area right here.
Now to something that's truly out of this world. A severe geomagnetic storm could move through northern lights, could make the northern lights visible in Metro Detroit tonight. According to a National Space Weather Prediction Center, conditions are really good for it. Now here's the warning from the Weather Service, and it's this line right here. Aurora may be seen as low as Pennsylvania to Iowa to Oregon. Now, here's a look at the aurora forecast. Yes, that's a real thing. It shows Michigan down right here on that line. Let's get out to Priya Mann. Priya, we normally hear about this happening up north, not down here in Metro Detroit, huh?
Yeah, Damon, you could almost say the stars have aligned for more reasons than one. It happens to be astronomy night here at the Detroit Observatory on the campus of University of Michigan. And for storm chasers and science enthusiasts, this is as big as it gets. Just think about it like this. It's the Eras Tour and it's the NFL Draft all combined in one, except the stage is our gorgeous sky.
And I had just gotten a text that there might be an aurora borealis tonight, and so I was thinking, well, is it true? Absolutely.
The excitement for tonight's celestial show is growing by the minute.
They want to know where to see the aurora. They want to know how they can see the aurora, if they can see the aurora.
In the aurora borealis storm chaser community, where does this rank?
Oh man, this is up there.
Melissa Kalin has been an aurora storm chaser for a dozen years, but this G4 storm, and mind you, they only go up to G5, might top her list of geomagnetic storms.
It means that almost one of the most powerful aurora displays possible is headed our way right now.
It's the first time since 2005 that scientists can predict the intensity of the aurora, and that's because of 5 massive solar flares over the past few days.
These charged particles will collide with air molecules like oxygen and nitrogen to emit light and color.
And that's what we're going to be seeing play out in the sky.
That's what we'll see tonight, yeah.
Your best bet to view the aurora borealis is somewhere dark, away from city lights.
It's amazing. I mean, one thing, when people go out tonight, if they can find dark skies and look up, they're gonna see aurora formations and movement. They're gonna see pillars and waves and swirls, and hopefully lots of color.
It's going to be quite the spectacle. So to be clear, it's going to start, the aurora is going to start in the northeast, move north. We could see it right where we are here in Metro Detroit. The best viewing times is between 1 and 4 this morning. And of course, it doesn't hurt. Maybe you want to get out there right after sunset, secure that spot. But between 1 and 4 in the morning is your best bet to see it. Sometimes it's actually interesting. Your camera will pick it up even if you can't see it. And if it is cloudy, just give it a little bit. Maybe the clouds will move on through and you'll be able to see some of those gorgeous colors, but this will definitely be one for the memory books. Reporting live in Ann Arbor, I'm Priya Mann, Local 4.
Oh man, Priya, between 1 and 4 in the morning, it sounds like it's going to be a late night over there at the observatory.
Yeah. Well, actually, astronomy night runs from 8:30 to 10:30, so it's going to be great. I mean, the conversation here is going to be stellar. But again, experts are advising you to get to a darker place to check out the aurora. I also want to make clear it's at the Judy and Stanley Frankel Detroit Observatory. There's several on campus, and you do need to register beforehand. We have that information up on clickondetroit.com. Send it back to you.
All right, Priya, good information. Thanks so much.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Guys, it's like every day we're on here, we're talking about the news, right? So much darkness in the world. But as I sit here tonight, I don't know if you guys are religious. You know, if you're people of faith, maybe you are, maybe you aren't. But kind of makes you realize that somewhere out there, there really must be, there has to be a higher power. Somebody's speaking to us. Doesn't matter how bad it gets out there, folks. There's more than hope. Julie Bean, Carrington event or no Carrington event. I look up tonight, I see that, and I just know. We're going to be okay, guys. We're going to make it. I'll be back tomorrow. Same time, same station. Love you guys. Catch you on the flip side.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.